Hey everybody, Sean from Media Assault here, and this is episode number 7 of my Essential Movies series. And if you're just joining us midstream with this particular video, I'm reviewing every movie in this book, which is Joe Layden's Guide to Essential Movies that you must see if you read, write about, or make movies. And there are different chapters, and the current chapter that I'm in deals with Americana, and I'm doing this film, Citizen Kane. And Citizen Kane, the fact that it's included in this Essential Movies book doesn't really surprise me. It probably shouldn't surprise anybody who does any type of investigation into what are mainly considered the greatest films of all time. And Citizen Kane is one of the most popular candidates for the greatest film ever made. And I've said that about quite a few films that I've reviewed so far, so obviously everybody has their own opinion. This is by far one of the more entertaining films that I've reviewed so far in the list, and I'm only 7 deep. But it was entertaining for different reasons than some of the other films that I said were very entertaining were. First off, talk about the plot. The plot is about a man named Charles Foster Kane who essentially inherited a large sum of money as a child and created this empire of newspaper and radio ownership, I guess. And the film chronicles what he does with his money and the relationships he has, and it just sort of chronicles his rise to power as he takes over this small New York newspaper, and how he immediately starts to manipulate not only the headlines but the people around him to get what he wants, ultimately leading a life that declines into isolation and bitterness. And of course this movie is very famous for the quote and the whole idea about Rosebud, and how that comes into play is that is the last thing that Charles Foster Kane says on his deathbed. He says Rosebud, and nobody knows what that means. And because he's such a powerful and influential person in American history, the people that run, I believe it is the people that run the newspaper that he used to run, they launch a campaign to find out what Rosebud means. So this reporter, played by William Alland, travels around interviewing people, trying to find out what Rosebud means. And in the process, he learns a lot of things about Charles Foster Kane that many people didn't know. And that is the bulk of the movie's narrative. It's these interviews with people as they unveil different bits and pieces of Charles Foster Kane's life to the camera. Now, what is really interesting, and probably the reason this is considered one of the greatest films I've ever made, is the way that the narrative unfolds in the film. It uses flashbacks, which was, I believe, one of the first times that was used on film. And the way that we learn about the character, it's done in flashbacks, it's done in montage sequences, and it's just very innovative for its time. Many people think that this movie was ahead of its time in terms of the way that it handles storytelling. One of the things that, and I probably wouldn't have known this had I not read about it while watching the film or before watching the film, is the fact that this movie is noted for its use of deep focus techniques. Greg Toland, the cinematographer for the movie, he was pretty much given carte blanche by Orson Welles, who directed the film, and he's the one who plays Charles Foster Kane, to do an experiment with different lenses and different telephoto techniques and a lot of different things of that nature. So you see a lot of unusual shots for the day, although seeing this film now, it looks relatively modern. It doesn't look all that unusual, so that's probably why I wouldn't have picked up on it had I not realized or read about the fact that this was fairly avant-garde for its time. There are a lot of low shots where the camera is basically on the floor looking up, and you actually see ceilings in this film, which was unusual, if not unheard of, back in 1941 when this film came out. And there are a lot of deep focus shots where you can see clearly what's happening way off in the background as well as what's happening in the foreground. And one of the things about Orson Welles' direction is he had stuff going on in the background and in the foreground simultaneously, and you could basically choose to watch whatever you wanted to watch. And probably the most famous example of that is a scene where Charles Foster Kane's parents are deciding what his future is going to be as he's about to be carted off to New York by a man who is going to basically raise him into someone who can handle a lot of money in his older years. You can see this innocent young child playing outside in the snow in the background as his future is being decided by the people in the foreground. There are a lot of shots like that. There are many shots in the film like that where you can basically watch things unfolding in the background as things are happening in the foreground. It's very cool. But like I said, it's so much taken for granted now that these techniques happen that had I not read about it, I may not have even noticed it. So I am glad I did do some research before I saw the film so I could recognize and appreciate those things happening on screen. As far as the film itself, I had seen it once before watching it tonight, and that was 15 years ago for a film class that I was in. And all I remember from watching it the first time was the fact that I enjoyed the film. I didn't really get anything out of it. Watching it now with the intent, of course, of reviewing it and probably paying quite a bit more attention, it was really eye-opening to see how the film told its story and did so just very methodically, and what it unveiled, when it unveiled the things about Charles Foster Kane, the character, was brilliant. It held my attention for the full 2-hour running time, which may not sound too remarkable for a film that's considered one of the greatest of all time, but it's a film that to me didn't seem like an old movie, and I said that about Gone with the Wind as well. This is a fairly timeless film. The only thing that may strike it as being dated, aside from the fact that it's in black and white, and to think about this film being in color is considered blasphemous by some, and I can see where people would have that opinion. I can't see this film working anywhere near as well being in color. And the soundtrack, the score by Bernard Herrmann it's got that old movie sound to it. When something comedic happens, there's the musical cues that, okay, this is something humorous happening. It works, and it's great, and it was noted by an Academy Award nomination back in 1941. But that's the only thing that makes the film seem dated, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just the only thing that doesn't seem like it could have been done today. Film scores today obviously are quite a bit different. But that's really it. The performances are outstanding. Orson Welles, which, I can't believe that it took me as long as it did for me to mention that he's the one that plays Charles Foster Kane. He is amazing in this movie, and to think that he was only 26 years old when this movie was made, and he transitions from a young man at the beginning of the film to a very old man by the end. It's just astonishing, and he does the mannerisms of an old man very well, very convincingly. His portrayal of the ego of Charles Foster Kane is just incredible. And he's surrounded by a great supporting cast, and I don't want to forget any of the names, so I'm going to read it out of the book. There's Joseph Cotten, who plays Joe Leland, his best friend, who's awesome. Dorothy Comingore, I'm not really sure how to pronounce that, who plays Susan Alexander, who's one of the women he marries in the film. She's really good. I can't remember the guy that plays Thatcher, and it is not listed here. But he's really good as well, although he's mostly at the beginning of the film. So Citizen Kane, is it one of the greatest films of all time in my estimation? Well, I don't feel qualified to list a greatest film of all time. Obviously, I'm doing this essential movies list as an educational thing for myself, as well as to kind of, maybe introduce some of you to some of these older films. Hearing me talk about them for the first time as someone who hasn't seen most of these either recently or at all, I don't feel qualified to say, is this the greatest film of all time? I could see why it is picked as the greatest film of all time by some people, but I tended to look at it more in a technological and filmmaking aspect. In terms of the performances and the story, they're good, don't get me wrong, but they don't strike me as anything spectacular. The narrative technique, however, in the film is brilliant, and for that I would give it a big thumbs up. So it's really more for the filmmaking techniques and the cinematography that I would find this film to be extremely notable, more so than the performances and the story. And that may just be a product of the fact that I've seen many, many films since this came out that do the same thing as this film, and it may not carry the same impact as it would had I seen it for the first time back when it was released. I mean, I obviously can't travel back in time to do that. So Citizen Kane is a very, very good movie, and it is incredibly watchable, incredibly entertaining, and I can only say that I would give it very high marks. I would give it an 8.5 out of 10, based on seeing it for what amounts to the first time in quite a while. Like I said, I've only seen it twice, and this is the second time. First time was 15 years ago. So essentially, this is almost like seeing it for the first time. I appreciated it much more the second time than I did the first time. But like I said, I did like it when I saw it the first time, but I didn't appreciate it anywhere near as much that time as I did this time. So 8.5 out of 10 for Citizen Kane. Definitely watch it. It's worth buying. Definitely worth renting. And I got it from Netflix. It is not available on streaming, so you do have to actually rent it. Do go out and buy it, and I did get this on DVD rather than Blu-ray. I don't know that it is available on Blu-ray. If it is, that's the way I'd go. But this was released by Turner Entertainment. There you go. Citizen Kane, 8.5 out of 10. Definitely check it out. And my next review, I'm not even sure what it is. Let me see. Rocky is coming up next. So that'll be my next review. So stay tuned for that. So this has been episode 7 of my Essential Movie series. I hope you're enjoying it. And feel free to check out the rest of the Essential Movies that I've reviewed in the playlist, which you can find at the top of the channel. Just click on Playlists, pick Essential Movies, and you'll see my other Essential Movies reviews. And as always, feel free to check out my movie, music, and video game reviews on the channel. And thanks for checking in. And if you like what you see, feel free to subscribe, because I'd really like to have you aboard for the rest of the movies that I have to review. And if my math is correct, I have 57 movies to go. So take it easy. Take care.